DeMeco Ryan speaks at the NFL Combine. What are the takeaways that should make a lot of Texan fans happy to hear? Cody and I discussed the overall tone of DeMeco Ryan's and Nick Caserio's press conference.
And to tie it all in, we want to develop a great team here that we can deliver wins to the city of Houston. We want to deliver a championship here to the city of Houston, and that's what it'll be about.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Thursday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. I'm John Hickman. Of course, I'm joined by none other than Sports Illustrators and Texans credentialed media members own Cody Davis. DeMeco Ryan spoke at the press conference. So for today, Cody and I will look at the overall tone between Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryan's. But first, we will focus on DeMeco Ryan's press conference at the NFL Combine. There were a lot of great takeaways, and I think that, Cody, I'll let you really kick it off, but I think that, I don't think this team is necessarily playing for the rebuild card this year. I don't. I think that this team will come out with a better roster after free agency and the draft. That's what I took away. This is one of my takeaways, but by all means, please kick it off.
My biggest takeaway from DeMeco Ryan was the fact I do agree with you that this team isn't playing for the rebuild card. On yesterday, I talked about how when Nick Caserio spoke, I talked about how it seemed like they're finally moving into phase 2 of this rebuild. And I know a lot of us, including myself, we think a lot of the top tier talents that the Texans are going to get this offseason is going to come through the draft, and rightfully so. However, it seemed like DeMeco Ryans has his eyes set on making a couple splashes in free agency. He talked about the fact that, it is a possibility that the Houston Texans will draft a quarterback with their top overall selection. But he also mentioned the fact that they're still going to go out in free agency and try to bring in a veteran quarterback. He was asked about Jimmy Garoppolo, and he didn't say that the Houston Texans were going to go after Jimmy, but he did say that he used Jimmy Garoppolo as an example on how there are a lot of talent, a lot of veteran talent, and a lot of talents that can actually be utilized for the Houston Texans for this upcoming season to actually go out there and make a big splash. He talked about when Jimmy Garoppolo came to San Francisco, I believe it was in 2019 when they traded for him, and they had an opportunity to get 5 wins. And one of my favorite parts of DeMeco Ryan's press conference was the fact that he said, it's not about going out there getting the big name players. It's all about getting players who can actually fit in your system. And that's how you make them be successful, which of course make the coaches look successful and ultimately make the team look successful. But overall, once again, loved everything that I heard from DeMeco Ryans, and I cannot wait to see. I know we all excited about the draft, but I cannot wait to see how the pairing of Ryans and Caserio is going to be able to be beneficial for this organization in free agency, which kicks off in 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and the year you're referring to with Jimmy Garoppolo, ladies and gentlemen, that was 2017.
2017.
But I'm glad that you mentioned how the pairing between Ryans and Caserio will work out, because one of the top takeaways for me, honestly, was when he was asked about his working relationship with general manager Nick Caserio, as to which he replied, "It's been awesome working with Nick. We hit the ground running. There hasn't been many breaks or much rest. Nick is awesome to work with. Nick is very knowledgeable, and I'm happy to be a part of a team that has a GM in place who has so much experience, a guy that I can bounce ideas off of. He's seen it done many ways, seen a lot of different players. Just having his knowledge and his experience has really been very beneficial to me." He continued with by saying it's been a very smooth transition. Communication has been awesome with Nick. We see the game in the same way. which is great. So I look at that and I want to reference yesterday's Nick Caserio press conference when he described DeMeco Ryans as someone who is awesome to work with. Same thing, DeMeco Ryans just said, open-minded, philosophically, DeMeco Ryans and I feel the same way. And I look at those things immediately. I go back to the very first press conference that Lovie Smith and Nick Caserio had here in Houston, and you can tell by then that they were not on the same page in terms of ideologies and philosophies, in terms of running a team. And I think that again, pairing DeMeco Ryans, a young bright mind, with Nick Caserio, who I think this would be, again, an opportunity for him to show what he really can do with a coach that people can buy into. Is amazing. And that leads me to DeMeco Ryans being asked about how will the Texans approach the quarterback position. He said, right now we have one quarterback on our roster, so we have to add to that position. We'll do it through free agency and the draft. That's the same thing you mentioned, Kurt. I thought that those were probably my top two takeaways to kick it off from DeMeco Ryans, just his relationship with Nick Caserio and understanding that these two men seemingly have an idea of how they want this team to be ran. And Nick gave you that on Tuesday. DeMeco gave it to you on Wednesday. So these two are on the same page. And I don't think that they're at the combine week to mess around. You're not going to be able to divide them. They're saying the same thing. So there won't be, hey, DeMeco, you want to look at this? And hey, Nick, you want to look at this? No, I don't think so. I think that they will be on the same page about how to build this roster, and they have a plan to upgrade their quarterback room. They're on the same page about that. So I took away from DeMeco Ryans' press conference, I am on the same page with my general manager. My general manager is on the same page about me. We will build this roster. We'll do it the way we see fit, working together. It was a lot of we during their press conference between both of them.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because last year it wasn't like that. I remember this time last year when we had an opportunity to hear from Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith talked about, in order for his defense to be ran successfully, he needs a guy that can actually dominate in the trenches. And what does Nick Caserio do? In the very first pick, you go out there and draft a cornerback that's not even successful in his system. And I just wanted to bring that up because, as we alluded to from when you take a look at the differences between Lovie Smith and DeMeco Ryans, even though a lot of people are excited about DeMeco's hiring, some people are still afraid, like, oh my God, how is this going to work out, especially given everything that we know about Nick over the last 2 years. However, John, I like that you put it, because this is the second consecutive press conference where it wasn't I, it was we, or him. So I like the fact that even when they are referring to each other more so, other than how it was in the last regime where it was just I, me, and I.
We are after the All-Star break. The end part of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Our new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and easy to use. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss out on the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you bet with FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on to learn more.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Thursday installment of Locked On Texans. Even though John and myself are not at the NFL Combine, unfortunately, pray for us. That
you know what? Let me. You know what? Next year.
That's why I say pray for us. We will be there. I would have had an opportunity.
Right and I hated I couldn't make the Senior Bowl, right? But I'm gonna tell you right now, if I get around the NFL Combine, my eyes are gonna light up. Not because it's reporters around and everything. I'm just going to be on I just want to watch. I want to see what makes these guys go, what the small details that make some of these players as good as they are. And that's what I love about football, man. Sometimes I can forget about the media stuff. I want to watch
what's going
on the field, man, and what makes these players so good. in order to bring that information back to you guys. But I'm sorry, Cody, to cut you off.
Oh no, you glad you I'm glad that you did that. Like I say, pray for us. Next year we will be at the NFL Combine. But even though we're not there, we're still getting a lot of information. John and myself was told by a source that the Houston Texans did meet with Alabama line rusher Will Anderson. He met with both the Texans and the Chicago Bears. Wonder what does that mean? Just wanted to throw that nugget out there because even though we are all expecting the Texans to go after Bryce or CJ with that number 2 overall pick, I do like the fact that they are still exploring other options. And John, going back to what DeMeco Ryans had to say about adding players at the quarterback position, because we only have one under contract. Highly doubt he's going to be the starter come the 2023 campaign. But I do wonder if they are able to make a big splash at that position, whether it be getting one of those, cream of the top veterans. I like the fact that if something happens, they have enough information to switch over and divert to another top prospect, So just wanted to throw that out there. Will Anderson did meet with the Houston Texans, and Anderson did say that he had a very good meeting with General Manager Nick Caserio.
I would like to openly say that, man, we really don't know what none of these teams are going to do. That's the beauty of the NFL draft,
At
right?
this point, no.
You don't know. Right? And everybody's thought process is, well, if there was a generational quarterback, the Bears would be trading out and everything. And you just don't know. Even with the Texans and Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans, they may feel like there's a player that can help them defend horizontally and vertically, right? And that's a lot of that. You get a defensive lineman an edge that can create pressure consistently that helps out everybody else. Because now the quarterback is rattled and trying to make a all throw. It may be one of these quarterbacks that can help this offense go, right? They may end up trying to make a trade. You never know with the NFL draft in the offseason, and that's what makes this league so great. But I want to get back to DeMeco Ryans. Another takeaway, and this takeaway, honestly, from the press conference we could have discussed this in the first segment. That is, will you call the defensive plays? And that's a valid question because DeMeco Ryans' biggest attribute is his ability to call plays on the defensive side of the ball. Now that he's a head coach, I don't think that he should immediately take that away. And so his response to whether or not you're going to call defensive plays was, we're still going through that process right now, haven't decided just yet, but Matt is very capable of calling defenses. He's done it before. He's knowledgeable of our scheme and how we want to play. So I'm very confident in Matt calling the plays as well. I think that this will be a situation where one guy is going to get a chance. I can see Matt Burke getting a chance to call defensive plays to start the year, but I don't think that his leash is going to be long in terms of what we're going to do is evaluate you right now week to week, and I think that there can be a scenario where by week 7 to 8, depending on how this defense is playing, DeMeco Ryans can step in and eventually start calling plays. Now, I do believe that Matt Burke, with me saying that, Matt Burke during that time span, will be the defensive play caller. However, make no mistake, DeMeco Ryans will be heavily involved in those, those film rooms and meeting sessions, putting this scheme together and understanding what player needs to do what on this particular down situation. So I think that they will work heavily together in order to get this defense to go.
I kind of think that DeMeco, because he's coming from Kyle Shanahan, I think he's probably going to utilize it the way Kyle Shanahan has been using it. Because we all know Kyle Shanahan is the one who is there calling plays and creating schemes and stuff. But at the same time, he is relying heavily upon his coordinators. Last year it was Mike McDaniels. This year, even though he wasn't the offensive coordinator, we heard a lot about how much he leaned upon Bobby Slowick, and now Bobby Slowick is the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. I think we're going to see that same structure from DeMeco Ryans here with the Houston Texans as well. He's going to be the one calling plays, but at the end of the day, as to improve his defensive schemes, as to, leading upon his coordinators and position coaches in order to continue putting all of the guys, but more so the young guys like Christian Harris, more so an ability to where they could get the best out of them. I think it's going to be more so of a working combination, unlike the last regime where it was just my way or the highway.
Yeah, no, that is fair and valid. I think that again, he will be heavily involved in a lot of these meeting sessions and putting together the scheme and really figuring out the players who he has on his roster. Now, that's what free agency in the offseason is for. You got the draft, got free agency, got the summertime training camps, and you got training camp, and they will work heavily throughout that process to get it done. This is DeMeco Ryan's first year, so I don't think he wants too much era of the things he can control. And I think that he can control whether or not he calls plays. And so, again, I look at that situation, understanding that in the past, Matt Burke wasn't necessarily a good DC in Miami. However, things have changed. Situations are different. And I think that Matt Burke will get an opportunity to call plays at some point if those things are not working out and the Texans are not thriving defensively. I can see DeMeco Ryan stepping in. He also talked about evaluating quarterbacks, and do you evaluate them based off their experience or system they play in? Now, this was very interesting. I think when you evaluate quarterbacks, different quarterbacks can do a lot of different things. I think the system is built around the quarterback as opposed to trying to fit a quarterback into a certain system. They're going to get their quarterback this year, and then they'll build around it.
Only if they had that same philosophy about 3 years ago? I'm just saying.
But he also, in that same quote, he did mention that it's all about players, the players that you have, not only at quarterback, but receiver. What does that guy do well? Linebackers, what do they do well? As coaches, you put guys in positions to be successful. It's not about a system per se. It's about just making sure that a player has the right tools and you're putting him in the right spot where he can thrive. Houston will get their quarterback this year, and they will build a system around him. I think that's fair to say. And I think that they have a good idea of the quarterbacks that they want on this team. And so I keep saying it, and I can't step away from it. I think Houston will have a wow moment in free agency. I really do. And I think that wow moment will come at the expense of a player that will really help this team out. And we look at whether or not it'll come from playing at the defensive tackle because they need help with stopping the run or upgrading at the wide receiver position. They have a plan in place. I've never felt in the past 2 seasons that they had a plan. They have a plan in place. They do now, and I believe that they will build it from the ground up per se. We're building a system, which makes sense because if you look at what Kyle Shanahan has been able to do in San Fran, you've had the likes of Brock Purdy we just saw, Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance. I forgot the other quarterback that had to step in when those quarterbacks got hurt a couple of years ago. But they've always been able to be somewhat successful and competitive because of the system that's built around their team. I think that's the biggest takeaway from Kyle Shanahan that DeMeco Ryans has. Build the system and everything else will fall in place.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Thursday installment of Locked On Texans. John and I are going to continue our countdown to free agency, looking at every single position as we discuss whether or not these potential prospects make sense for the Houston Texans. Today, we're looking at the wide receiver group. And, John, I understand that this is a team that needs a lot of help at that position group. However, in terms of what free agents I think the Houston Texans should go after in free agency, I'm going with a guy they should just bring back, Chris Moore. I understand that this is a team that needs, more so of a number one wide receiver. I think they're going to have an opportunity to get that in the draft. Not only that, you also got to take into consideration the departure of Brandon Cooks. However, over the last 2 years, when you take a look at the eventual one guy, eventual departure, excuse me. But over the last 2 years, when you take a look at one guy who has been a consistent factor for the Houston Texans, not just in the wide receiving core, but through all position group, has been Chris Moore. Over the last 2 years, this guy has redefined his career. In 2 years with the Houston Texans, have recorded 775 yards, 4 touchdowns, and on several occasions, especially those times where you didn't have Brandon Cooks, you didn't have Nico Collins. This year, unfortunately, all throughout the season, you did not have John Mechie. Chris Moore stepped up and was this team's number one wide receiver. We know that he played a big role in the Texans nearly pulling off an upset against the Dallas Cowboys towards the end of the 2022 campaign. So when you take a look at Chris Moore, this is a guy you could play inside, you could play on the outside, and he's going to give you that production. Plus, as I mentioned, me, love free agency, love veterans that could come in and actually be a tool that these young guys can use. Chris Moore can actually be one of those players as well.
Yeah, man. Listen, I think Chris Moore did a lot to bring himself back for another year. He was dependable. He's one of those Nick Caserio guys, though. Smart, dependable, go out there and make some play. No, and I'm serious, man. He deserves another year with the Houston Texans. If not with Houston, he's one of those guys where good luck to wherever you go, right? Because you come in and you are a pro about your job. I've talked about who I think Houston should target in free agency, and I do believe that that's DJ Chalk. Recently played for the Detroit Lions, and Alan Lazard, I wouldn't be necessarily mad at as well. I think that depending on what Aaron Rodgers does in Green Bay, he could be looking for a new home, and this could be his last chance at a big payday in a sense. So Houston, again, I just talked about the system that DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio will try to build around this team on both sides of the ball. And it starts with wide receivers. Both of those guys mentioned the wide receiver position, like how important it is to build depth and be able to attack teams vertically and horizontally. They understand that this team has missed a certain dynamic from this group since the trading of DeAndre Hopkins, since the trading, the PED suspension of Will Fuller.
It was back on the trading block, by the way.
Just come home. Just come home, I guess.
Another one. Most of the people you had problems with no longer in that building. Just saying. But do you want to spend that much money on
Absolutely not.
I was about to say, because he's definitely not the player he was down here in the city of Houston.
Yeah, and then I think he's going to be asking for too much that Houston can't afford right now. I want to pivot really quick. The biggest story from Wednesday's combine wasn't DeMeco Ryans. It was Jalen Carter. A lot of legal issues, and arrest warrant was issued due to his involvement of a crash that unfortunately ended the lives of some Georgia staff members and I think a teammate. It's tragic. And he fled the scene after they were racing. So right now he has been charged with misdemeanor charges of reckless driving. No DUI. And so that's good. But DeMeco Ryans did mention that he did not get a chance to speak with Jalen Carter. I just wanted to mention that to you guys, that from Wednesday, as much as we are here to talk about DeMeco Ryans, that was the biggest story from that day. And the Texans did meet with TCU wide receiver Quentin Johnston.
Party over here.
Yeah, according to our good friend Aaron Wilson. So a lot to take away, and Cody and I will continue to discuss DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio. I think that's fair. And I think the overall tone from both of those men throughout the past 2 days is they're not looking to have a down year. If it happens, it happens. I'll say that. But I think that both of them have a mindset of, we have an opportunity to make this team competitive right now. And let's go out there and do that. And let's get some wins in your first year, because Nick Caserio desperately needs it. Thank you guys for checking out today's show. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans, and also subscribe to the YouTube page as well.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.